pietrada. Polaris. Polaris.
Hi, everyone. Simon Foster, Festival Director here. I am so excited to be talking to Miss Kirsten Carthew, the director of our opening night film, opening the festival all over the country. The movie is Polaris. Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us from the eastern side of Canada, I believe.
Yes, you're correct. And it's a total pleasure to be here. And thank you to you and to your audiences. What an honor to play at your festival and to be opening night. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. So thank you.
That's very sweet of you. No, it's our pleasure. It's our honor to have the film. Was there a moment, these sort of interviews always start with a, what were the origins of the story type question? And I want to phrase that like this. Was there a moment when you recall when you first thought, I want to make a movie in the Yukon wilderness with a polar bear and a child actor?
No. No, but I mean, the Yukon, yes, the origins of the story were sort of in a neighboring territory, but still in the subarctic. It's a place that I grew up in, so I'm very familiar. So even though it sounds completely eccentric, for me, it's quite normal. Yeah, I wrote the film with the idea that we would always be filming with a live polar bear, and I had no idea how we would do it, particularly on our budget, because we have a not a no budget, but it's a lower budget film, and it's got actions and stunts. And when it came time to sort of film, I went looking for a polar bear, and I was just so excited and felt like there was so much synergy at play for this film, because the only professional working bear, in fact, lives in Canada and is female and was available. So it felt very fortuitous that all kind of came together. And in fact, Polaris is one of Aggie. Aggie's the name, that the real world name of our polar bear. And this was one of her last films. She's just gone into retirement after a 26 or 27 year acting history. So
wow, that's an extraordinary farewell. She gives a wonderful performance in the film. Give us some backstory to the setting. The year is 2144. The world is covered in snow. Tell us how this vision came about.
Yeah, the world is upended, and I'm a real huge champion of environmental themes in all of my work. And I knew I wanted to set the story world in a winter world. And clearly, according to all of the science, our world is sort of more burning up. So this is kind of after the burn comes the freeze. And that was just how I tried to justify having a winter world. So it's the specific area where the film takes place is a part of the world called the frozen world. And it's just like in any fantasy or sci-fi film where you've given a name to a place because that's what it is. You know, the Badlands you have in Australia, the red lands, the blue water or the green, it's sort of specific and vague at the same time. And for me, the intention was to set the world in a time that really reflects the degradation and the disrespect that we're currently showing our planet. So to put it in an extreme landscape. So that's where the year 2144 came from. And if I'm being honest, I didn't even want to date it that far into the future, but it's really hard when you watch a movie to read. At least I'm a little dyslexic, so when I see numbers and I see 2044, I wanted it to be clear that it's a little further into the future than 10 years from now, something like that.
Yeah. In researching this interview and researching the film, I've become a little bit obsessed with Polaris and its position in the sky as the North Star, and it's the center of the northern sort of nighttime sky and all these amazing things. Does it have specific significance within the culture, Indigenous or otherwise, of Canada?
I'm not Indigenous. I really can't speak to that. I would say and ironic because you're not in the Northern Hemisphere, but in all countries in the Northern Hemisphere, my experience is that there is a mythology and or a relationship to the North Star. And outside of that, just in terms of pure science, in terms of navigation, the North Star, and if anyone from Australia travels, which literally every Australian I've ever met does, you always meet people who have the North Star as a tattoo, and it's the guiding star. It's used by explorers of all kinds, pre-GPS, pre sort of current technology, as the most seemingly stable star in the sky. So it's always been the star that, whether you are a land or a water explorer, you've always been able to use to navigate your way. So it's a very powerful and important star, and it's also steady. Like, it doesn't change position. It's always there. And for me, it's a really big deal in the story. First, I'm so glad you're geeking out on it, because it's such a big deal. And the idea is that the star has changed position. This is almost the story of Polaris is almost a reimagineered telling of the constellation of the Little Dipper, without giving too much away. And Polaris is the North Star, and it is the star in the Little Dipper constellation. And the idea that the North Star is on the move. It is a star renowned for its stability, and now it is on the move. And for me, that really speaks to the change that is needed. Sort of, we need a new north, we need a new global direction that's pretty dramatic. So for the North Star to be on the move, I think, really is important to the story, for the journey that Sumi goes on, for the magical elements, and for the hope that actually exists in this dystopian world, for that to actually be true.
I can't think of a contemporary director that so wonderfully utilizes quote unquote location as a source of inspiration in their narrative. Certainly in The Sun at Midnight, which I love, definitely in Polaris. What does a location shoot inspire in you, especially this part of the world, which you mentioned before we started recording, that is where you're from?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've grown up, I've had the real privilege of living in a lot of parts of Canada, also a lot of different parts of the world. And I was always a shy kid. I have two brothers, so wherever I moved, I kind of had a bit of a community, but I always took solace in nature. It's always when I was stressed out or overwhelmed, I always found a mountain to climb, sort of a river or an ocean to swim in. Something in nature was always my source of strength and calm. And that felt always very intuitive and normal for me. And I think because I've had the privilege of living in a lot of very sort of natural settings, and they've been very diverse, from deserts to, mountains and kind of subarctic and countries and farm sides. But so I've always just related really well to nature. And as I've grown up, I realized not everybody has had that fortune. They've had other kinds of fortunes, but that's sort of been something that I feel really comfortable with. And it's a part of life that I really think can contribute to one's own self-growth. I think there's a lot to be discovered, and it doesn't matter what your relationship is. It doesn't mean you have to climb a mountain. Maybe you, maybe you have a potted cactus at home or something like that. But there's just an opportunity for self-discovery and growth through that relationship. So for me, it's very important. And I've had, the privilege of living in some pretty extraordinary landscapes, which are just like massive characters themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, speaking to an Australian audience, Australia is such a massive country, so many different landscapes within Australia. When you're kind of out, walking around, whether it's land, sea, wherever, you just have a way of being that I think is so wonderful. And I wanted to always showcase on camera. It's especially cinematic. And not sadly, I think the northern parts of Canada, that there aren't very many people who live there, and the film communities that are there are full of very talented people, but it's very sort of new, relatively new. So a lot of the landscapes haven't really been seen on camera. And I always think when you love something, you want to share it, and so it's very normal to want to kind of share the places where I've lived and loved. And something I love about Polaris is you can love the landscape, even though it's, it's not a romantic comedy or something like that. It's
No,
still,
it's not a romantic comedy.
yeah, not quite.
Not quite, no. I was very fortunate to have spoken to Viva Lee a couple of days ago, and she's a wonderful young lady and a terrific actress. Tell us about drawing that performance of Sumi out of Viva.
I mean, Viva's just, I love her. She's amazing. When we filmed with her, I think, it's one of those things I never really care to tell people, how old somebody is, but she was 11. I mean, she's 12 when you spoke to her, and she's got an extraordinary outlook on life and a maturity, but also just hugely fun and charismatic. It's her name, like her name, Viva, it's life, it's joy, it's all of these things. And we had a lot of fortune in terms of our casting. We cast a really broad net. We had literally hundreds of young people audition, and there's so much talent all across Canada. Viva really stood out for her physicality and for her commitment to owning a role. And for me, especially with COVID and the circumstances around how we would shoot, for me, it's really important to work with actors, whether they have, tons of experience or just a little bit, who I have confidence in, that they know themselves, so that they know their kind of boundaries, they know what they need, they know what they don't need, things like that. I think, and Viva has that maturity, even for someone who's 11. I mean, I think I learned that way later in life. But also, I really think it's important for me, and I don't know that I will always work this way, but certainly for this role, where I wrote the character, and I know I'm going to direct the character, but I really want an actor who's going to own the character. So I had a very, candid conversation with Viva pretty early on that, once you get cast in this role, it's yours. I mean, I'm going to do my part to shape it a little bit, but it's my expectation that you will get to know the character more than I will, because you will, I'm more like the parent, and then you're the actual person being kind of the character in the world. Yeah. So, and I think she did a really extraordinary job, and she really took ownership of the character, and brought her own thoughts, and I did see the interview you did with her. You can tell she brought a lot of herself to the role. Yeah. Doesn't always have to be the case, but she really embodied the role, and that's such an exciting experience to work with actors who I mean, that's the work of actors. It's such hard work, but they make it look so easy, that they really just give in and really birth the character themselves. So I for sure am happy to take some credit as a director, but the truth is, it's mostly on Viva. Yeah, it's mostly on Viva. Yeah.
I recall an interview that the great actress Maggie Smith did, and she literally says to most of her directors after she reads a script, yeah, it's fine, just cut out about 30% of the dialogue. It's a film. We don't need all these words. Do it with pictures. And you do that. There's very little dialogue in Polaris at all. Tell us about creating this narrative language without words.
Yeah, for me, the story, as you say, is set in a dystopian future, as I say too. And the story itself, however, to me isn't super dystopian because we are seeing the world through the eyes of Sumi, who is a 10-year-old girl, and she's raised by an apex predator. She's raised by a polar bear. So her life hasn't been easy, but it has been extraordinary. And she has developed an extraordinary skill set. And she has grown up away from human populations. So she doesn't necessarily have a dystopian view of the world herself. And for me, I really wanted audiences to see the film through her eyes. And it didn't feel right for the audience to somehow understand the language of the Morads, who are the sort of the bad gals, and some of the other characters verbatim, sort of in that, word for word, what the intentions are, if Sumi herself can't understand them. But this isn't, a philosophical film. Nobody's, smoking cigarettes, drinking wine, talking about how, life should or should not be. It's very action oriented. So to me, it's very clear what is being said. And I think there's something really universal about just, watching a film and knowing what's being said without absolutely knowing. It's like when you go to a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you still kind of know what's being said. And I think more immediately, most people have a pretty intimate relationship. Maybe it's with a baby, but maybe it's with a dog or a cat or a horse or, dolphins or whatever your animal of choosing. You're speaking an emotional language. And that's what I was curious to explore in this film, where essentially all of it is subtext. It's, as you're saying, I mean, Maggie Smith's pretty extraordinary, and so good with words, but it is true. I think you don't always need all of the words. And I really wanted to see, an intuitive way. Like, I took a really intuitive approach to creating the film, and I wanted the audience to also have a very intuitive experience of the film. So those were my decisions, and I specifically requested that there not be subtitles. I don't think they're necessary. I think it's, it's up to distributors in different countries if they use subtitles or not, but I don't think you need them. I feel like it's there's not a lot of dialogue, and the dialogue that's there, I feel, is pretty clear what is being said, even if you don't know for sure.
Viva spoke so insightfully and eloquently about the inspiration she drew from Polaris being an all-female identifying production. What does that element of the shoot mean in real terms to you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is definitely not the first all-female cast, but first and foremost, I want to make films that are entertaining. And I always thought, why not? I mean, women kick ass, and I want to see more stunts and action movies, and, where the women have kind of all the roles. And so the first response to why an all-female cast is kind of, why not? Of course, why not? Just who cares? And then I also, on a more philosophical level, wanted to make some kind of thematic commentaries about our socio-political context. Literally, we can lift each other up as people and also rip each other apart, and that is what happens in the film. And I thought, if ironically, by just focusing on one gender, of all the genders we have, you kind of can't make this about gender. But if this were a film where, you know, the Morads, who are the bad gals, were the bad guys, then it would start to feel a little bit more like a gender comment, a comment about gender, as opposed to about all people and about these systems. And the Morads in the film, the called the bad gals, they're all female, but they're operating on a really traditional patriarchal might is right kind of structure. So these structures, they're not sort of inherent to our biology or inherent to our identity. They're really inherent to these systems that we've created. So I think there's that thread of commentary throughout if you choose to sort of engage with it. But otherwise, I think you can just enjoy the action scenes and the characters for who they are.
And enjoy them. I did. As I expected, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's the insight you give is just terrific, and I know the audience will be lapping up this terrific action sci-fi adventure film. Kirsten Carthew, thank you so much for talking to us and for making the time. I know you've had a very hectic sort of schedule the last couple of weeks, so thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you down here in Australia soon.
I'd love to, and I'd also like to say to Australians, like, thank you for your cinematic history. I mean, one of my great inspirations was Road Warrior. I'm really inspired by that film and that sort of all the imagery and just the iconicness of all the characters and the landscape there. So I've unabashedly described this film as Mad Max in the Arctic, which loosely I think you can see it, but it's not quite an exact kind of comparison. But I'm a real fan of all the Mad Max films, but in particular Road Warrior. And you know, I thank Australia for giving the world some of your great films. So thank you.
That's very kind of you to say. I know if I had George Miller here, he'd express regret at not using more snow and more polar bears in his films. So so thank you very much. Thanks, Kirsten. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.